Hey everyone, Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business here. Today we're here with Jacques Wales from Discussions.app. We're going to be talking about decentralized social media, blockchain, a lot of different things, and we're also going to talk a little app has been doing in the last year or so, because the last time we chatted with him was probably around a year ago. It was about 100 episodes back. So it's been quite a while and a lot has changed since then. So we're going to just dive right into all that. But I guess before we do that, for anyone who hasn't seen the last one or doesn't know you or about Discussions, we'll quickly dive into that. So if you want to just start off by giving a little introduction about yourself, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jacques, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Discussions.app. And Discussions.app is what we imagine Reddit to be if it was built in the 21st century using 21st technologies, which is the blockchain. Right. So Discussions is a social media aggregation platform. We support both centralized social media platforms and decentralized social media platforms. And our goal is to bring kind of all these social media platforms together in the same way that Reddit did for information back when it was first launched. Information and news story breaks on social media right now, and that's what we're aiming to do with Discussions. You bring all these different silo platforms and you bring all their information into one place where you can easily consume the information.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk about decentralized social media and how that's different from regular centralized social media. And I guess even just for people who are watching who are maybe unaware, I mean, when I say centralized social media, I mean legacy platforms, and by that I mean platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all of the traditional sort of social platforms that are out there. Do you want to just briefly break down for people what the general differences are between a centralized social platform and a decentralized social platform?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a very complicated subject, as I know, you have gotten into conversations with people, very heated conversations about whether a platform is decentralized or not, right? This is actually a kind of pry on, at least in the crypto anarchist, cryptocurrency space, like you want things to be decentralized, meaning that you don't want to have one person or a group of individuals in charge that could manipulate the platform in any untransparent way, right? The ideal of decentralization is that the rules are open and transparent for everyone to see. Everyone follows the same rules. So, take for example YouTube, right? YouTube is the perfect example of a centralized platform. YouTube's algorithm is not transparent. They don't give you information about why a video is trending and why a video has been removed. They give you some very vague reasons, but it's not applied, across the board evenly. And there's a lot of exceptions. With a decentralized platform, what you do is you encode those moderation policies within the blockchain, within the application itself, so that anyone looking at the code would understand exactly what it would do. Not only that, that information should be unrestricted, meaning anyone should be able to access it and interact and read and do things that they want, consume that information by themselves without any kind of middleman. Again, deciding what information gets feed to you, and you understand where the information is coming from. So that's
Yeah.
my understanding and our ethos. When we building discussion, those are the principles that we follow, and everything else is on the spectrum of centralization.
Yeah. And just to break that down into a little bit more layman's terms for people who may not have as good of a grasp, I would say a really good comparison is like, when you see people being banned off of different platforms, and it's like, who is making these decisions? It's very arbitrary sometimes. It's different when it's like a specific set rule that applies to everyone evenly, and it's just like very obvious, and you can usually tell once you have to start questioning it and you're like, oh, I'm not sure. That's when things get iffy, and then it comes down to the bias of any random person who's like a moderator, admin, whatever happens to be. And even beyond like the aspect of just like mods and different things, and what they're going to do to you as a user, even the platform itself. So the Twitter hack that happened I don't know, a few weeks ago or a month ago or however long ago it was. It's hard to keep track of the time these days because there's just so much happening in such a small amount of time. But with that, it was because that they were centralized that someone was able to sort of get this like God mode access to like all these accounts. And that is a flaw of centralization because that doesn't happen in a fully decentralized social platform. So there's a lot of other things that can happen. And again, using Twitter, someone could hack your account because of what Twitter has done by design. So it's not just like moderation decisions that are going to be a problem, because some people might say, oh well, I don't say anything controversial or whatever, so this shouldn't really matter to me. Well, it's like, well, your account could still be hacked because of decentralized policies. So do you want to just talk a little bit about how decentralization is more secure, and maybe also how it's less secure too, in terms of like how fast you can move and stuff like that, to kind of give the full 360-degree look at this issue.
Oh, that's such a fantastic question. I wish I get that question a lot more. So, going back, I just want to touch on the Twitter point a bit more. I think, you hit on the important thing, why we care about centralization. The perfect centralization model as we have it now is Bitcoin, right? And on the Bitcoin system, no one can penetrate the system without alerting everyone else, right? And that was one of the flaws with the centralized system of Twitter. They had all the information siloed, guarded by a few individuals, and if there is ever a breach in that system, no one knows except for those who are, holding that database, holding those keys to that database. If you were to redesign Twitter on a blockchain model, you would never have this wide scale of breach because everyone would be responsible for their own account. And even if you are able to breach an account, that account is limited to one individual or, a few more that are sharing it. So, that's one of the benefits of decentralization, where you get this resiliency and you get this added layer of security, which we are finding out that is more and more important especially in the realm of social media. We talk about how evil Facebook has become. Maybe what we're missing from that is how powerful it has become in our society. And it's crazy to think that Twitter could sway elections, but at the same time, it's crazy to think that Twitter could be hacked so easily and can be hacked so repeatedly. So, this is, again, this is a point that I think is lost on people, is that these systems are now so important in our society that it makes sense to apply these very advanced technology to safeguard it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think a good way to sort of like visualize this is, I can't remember exactly the stat, but I think if your internet traffic is going through centralized servers, I think 80% of internet traffic touches like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter. I think it's like something like 80% of internet traffic goes through one of their servers. So it really shows you how, like, if you were banned off of all of these, how like much of an impact that would make, and you would only be able to experience like a very small portion of what the internet actually would have to offer because of that. So, it's pretty crazy how much more control and power that they have than people actually are aware of. And what blockchain sort of does is it's like the Web 3.0, where it's not worrying so much about those centralized servers, and it's more peer to peer. And I think that's a really, really important thing that people have to sort of realize, because I mean, a lot of this is just that people don't realize the problem, and that's why they don't need to look for the solution. So what do you think are some of the ways that we can kind of like bring more awareness to this and like educate people more about these issues, so that they are aware of the solutions themselves and why they would even need to get those solutions?
I think, again, fantastic point. I think we're getting to the point where people are conscious about the problems, where you have these very high profile documentary, high profile movies made, articles made. The social dilemma was like Netflix blowing up. Everyone's talking about it. So people are being alerted to these problems in these systems. But I think the next step is, what are the solutions, right? Because it's very hard to tell someone to, okay, well, you just got to leave Facebook. Well, like Facebook is where my friends are. This is why I keep up with my college buddies. So that problem hasn't been solved yet. How do you transition users from centralized services into decentralized services, and how can you make that transition um, a less abrupt experience? Because you are ask them to leave the online community which they have built over the years, and it's becoming more important, especially in this age where we can't go outside. The only way we communicate is through online, platforms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big issue, and that's an issue that we were looking at in discussions. And this is why discussions were putting so much effort into blending in these centralized platforms, like centralized YouTube. We could host YouTube videos, but at the same time, we could host library content. Our goal is that if discussions become big enough and we have these new users who are landing on discussions, we don't have to convince them to say, hey, use library. This is better for you because these reasons. They could see for themselves. There's a YouTube video, there's a library video. These are similar services. And then you start to get into the intricacies. Okay, well, library is paying for this content creator, and they could start to distinguish the differences themselves and figure out for themselves. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so what would you say for, like, for example, on a recent Twitter post that I made, someone was complaining that with free speech and, like, not having a lot of censorship, you get a lot more fringe ideologies, a lot more, like hate speech, borderline hate speech, stuff like that. So like what are your thoughts around that, and like how does Discussions.app approach that?
I'll give my personal opinion on it first, and then we go into the how discussion is set up to tackle these very sensitive issues, right? I am of the bias of being very liberal. I run a free speech platform after all. We want to hear new ideas, but where we draw the line at discussions is that when does it becomes not contributing to a discussion, but rather than distracting from it, right? So if you want to express your opinion about a very controversial subject, that's we're okay with that. But if you take it a step further and you say you want to act on or you want to do harm to another individual, that's when we pull back and say this is not contributing to the discussions at hand, and that's when we put down our foot and say this content does not belong on our platform. That said, how discussions handle it is very differently, and this is one of the reasons why I'm very comfortable expressing my personal opinion. I am the default moderator on discussions, so me and my team members. So we moderate everything, and you can see what we have moderated. There's a public moderation log where you can see Jack removed a post today because he thought it was not safe for work or it was spam, whatever it might be. Where discussions gives more room than other platforms would have to is that you can actually remove the default moderators and you just install your own moderators. So you can actually get to choose who becomes this filter of information for you. And obviously there are some legal limits that we have to comply, and when we do operate in different countries. But beyond even that, the tech stack is designed so that you can actually spin up your own discussions. So you don't even need to go to discussions.app, and you don't have to worry about the legal concerns that we have. If you want to say, I want to see the raw version of everything that's ever taken place on discussions, you could run up your own instance of discussions, and you can see that, and you become, you're us essentially. You have the same power as us in terms of filtering information.
Awesome, awesome. So, do you guys mainly just sort of adhere to free speech laws in the US, or does it sort of change? Like, is there like some sort of global thing that you refer to? Is it like different for different countries? Like, how does that work?
We only mainly focus in North America and Europe, and so obviously we comply with the legal laws of those countries. And that's all I could say.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, okay, well, let's talk about like blockchain integration, getting a little bit away from decentralization, but also still very similar. So the main difference for people who are listening and watching here, you can have a decentralized or a centralized social media platform, irrespective of blockchain. Where blockchain comes in is it can definitely make it a lot more secure, do a lot more. And specifically, some people might only want to use a platform if it is using the blockchain. So in terms of how integrated a platform actually is with the blockchain could also add to how decentralized it is. So do you want to just kind of break that down a little bit for people in terms of like platforms that are using blockchain integration versus not, and then where does Discussions.app fall into that?
Yeah, so this again would be in and by itself another hour-long discussion because even within the realm of blockchains, you have semi-public blockchains, perfectly public blockchains, and private, completely private blockchains. So even within, just using whether or not you're using blockchain itself does not add to the conversation is this decentralized.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess, I think if we were to put, like on a spectrum of all the projects I can name, and I think you could help me with this. Um, I think the I think the discussions is closest to the Steam model, whereas on the very far end of decentralization, where you have the content, you have the token economics, you have the moderation system, you have the reward system, all on chain. So these are running on the blockchain, the code that everyone can inspect and everyone can understand how the way it should function. And then one step up, you have platforms that are, they have a reward mechanism. They have maybe they store, but they don't store the content on chain. Maybe just they store a hash of the content on chain. That's you could ensure the integrity of the information, but you can't ensure that the information will be there for you to view. So that's another step, in decentralized direction. So that would be like something like Mines and Publish OX. I think Publish OX is a little bit more still because if I'm not mistaken, their reward system is pretty much code they run and not a smart contract.
Mm. Yeah, and they also they do approve authors on PublishOX. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit more centralized than Minds. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And then you have very centralized ones where you have a reward mechanism that's on chain. The content's not on chain. Um, the only thing that's using the blockchain is the token itself, which would be something like Uptrend, as far as I'm aware of. So that's higher on the list, and then you have all the way at the end where everything is controlled by a few entities, moderation, reward structure, content policy, infrastructure. The whole tech stack is owned by a few people, and they can take you offline at a flick of a switch. So
Like
that
D Live.
I haven't been following BeLive, but are they still on Steam or what's the deal?
No, I mean they moved from Steam to Lino, and then they moved from Lino to Tron when Justin Sun bought it. So they've migrated quite a few blockchains, and they always leave people a little concerned and with a bad taste in their mouth because usually. And what happened recently was they make like a time limit for you to get your money back out of the platform, and then once that's gone, it's theirs now. So and they have a ridiculous amount of restrictions to withdraw, like KYC. You have to be a certain age. You have to have a certain amount. You have to do all this stuff to get your money back, including streaming, which is wild to me because only streamers can get their money out, whereas everyone else is just not able to access their funds, which is crazy. I don't even consider it a real blockchain platform. But yeah, that's like the crazy forest end that you could get. Barely even blockchain, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a lot of flack against like live streaming platforms because most of them are just on blockchain. They're not even on blockchain.
It's really hard to even with a blockchain like EOS where you can modify it to be extremely high performant. Obviously, you trade a bit of decentralization for it. Even with like that, I don't see how you do video streaming on a blockchain. So
Yeah.
I'm very skeptical when someone tells me video streaming on a blockchain. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't see it happening like actually on the blockchain for
yeah,
a long time. Like we'll have to have some really, really interesting solution to actually see something solid to actually solve that. Yeah.
no.
Um so so that was a really good breakdown of how blockchains actually or how social platforms actually integrate with the blockchain. Though I think that's a really good overview, and there are a few other blockchains, but I think you touched on a lot of like the major dApps there, so that was really good. Um, so for people who have never heard of Discussions.app and like they don't use it, do you want to break that down? Like, because you mentioned EOS, it's not necessarily on EOS, but if you want to just sort of break that down and like what blockchain you're using and how that all works.
Yeah, so discussion is designed to be decentralized, but it's also designed to be blockchain agnostic. Agnostic, sorry. So we're starting with EOS because that model allow us to do some very interesting things like paying for user transactions, user actions, and making these what otherwise be very clunky experience feel a lot like a centralized service experience, right? One of the benefit of being a centralized service is that you could control every aspect of your project, and you have a lot of tools already developed to make that experience very user friendly. There's not that tech stack currently on discussion. So we actually had to build that tech stack,
Mm.
not only on EOS but on top of EOS. So discussion
Hmm.
is free to use. You can sign up, get an account. Posting is free. Transfers are that simple. Um, so yeah, but we're starting with EOS, and we recently are just want a grant to expand onto the TLOS blockchain. So we're gonna be expanding in TLOS, and after that, we are gonna kind of go like a roll call of all of these different ESIO blockchains, and then next step is onto Ethereum. So we want discussions actually to be incorporating all these different blockchains, and the goal is for discussions not to be this singular, social media platform itself, but to be a home for all these different cryptocurrency projects. Where they could tip each other in Bitcoin Cash, they could send each other sushi tokens. They could pay for content in their respective projects token. One of the things that we've been very focused on is actually building out this infrastructure where you as a project could plug and play your token into discussions to start rewarding content creators, to start rewarding people within your community that are contributing to the project. So we have raindrop, we have tipping. We recently introduced something called time lock content, so which allows a content creator to put their piece of content behind a paywall, a temporary paywall. So, for example, if I put up a video, I could charge 10 Atmos. I could charge the viewer 10 Atmos, or the viewer could wait up to 12 hours to get that piece of content for free.
Mm.
So, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so it's like time exclusive. Yeah, I like that. That's definitely a good way to add some more reason for people to use paywalls. Because yeah, I'm always hesitant to just put something up 100% paywall
yeah,
because I don't want people to like miss out on whatever I might be showing them, and I don't want it to be like only if you pay me can you get this.
yeah,
But I definitely think it's a great way to like if you want to get it first or exclusive or just support them a little bit more, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just wait a little bit and still get it. I think that's definitely one of the best ways to do paywalls.
yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a solid way to do that. Um, so you mentioned like you're able to so because you guys are crypto agnostic, I think that's really really important for interoperability between blockchains because that's a huge like hurdle for most projects where it's like
yeah,
people have no idea what this coin is. Also like if a coin goes down in value, a lot of people might be like, well, I don't know if I want to use this anymore. We saw this with Steam after the big crash in 2017. I think it was like 60% of the users or something stopped using the platform because the token went from like $13 to like $2. And
Yeah.
then now it's like 17 cents or 16 cents. But yeah, so like I think being agnostic kind of avoids some of those issues around like, people just tying the value or the price of something to a project, and it's like that's the only thing they see. I think it's really important to just be able to use other coins and not be so tied to that. That's kind of what PublishOX has been doing as well, by not having like a specific coin dedicated to their platform. And I think that's a really good model. So it's great that you're doing the same thing, but you also have Atmos. So it's like you've got the best of both.
I'd
So for
add a little bit to that. So, we're doing this for two reasons. One, it makes good business sense. As you mentioned, if you have your token tied to your platform, token values fluctuate. That's just the nature of the token market, right?
Yeah.
If the token is the main focus of the platform, as you said, and when the token price drops, activities drops. So we kind of diversify ourselves by supporting a lot of different tokens, but we also see it as a way to kind of eliminate or at least try to balance some of the bias, you know, that we do see in these platforms where Steam content is always very pro Steam, right?
Mhm.
Uptrend content is always very pro uptrend. It's just like the nature of because you are rewarding individuals within your community that show support, right? And therefore you get a lot of positive reinforcement. But at the same time, it could kind of become an echo chamber, and it's not a good
Yeah.
idea because we already see these echo chamber problems within social media, like centralized social media platforms, and it often creates a very bad experience for the end user in the long term. So having
Yeah.
multiple tokens, having multiple projects that are interested in different things to share the idea, to fund discussions in the discussions community, we see it as a way to kind of have a very well balanced community on discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense to me because yeah, if you just get too focused on one thing, it's just going to kind of take away from what's really important about the project. And on the flip side too, not even if the token goes down, in the case of mines, for the longest time, the mines token was a utility token, so it wasn't technically able to be sold, but you could sell it on an unlisted fork delta exchange. Like you couldn't get there unless you had the exact URL. You couldn't navigate there on fork delta itself. So barely anyone was actually doing this, but not very long ago, Mines decided that they were going to actually start selling their token. But when they did that, they were like, oh no, now all these people have tons of our token and we want to sell it for $2 when originally it was 15 cents. So they didn't want to give all that money away to people for having these tokens for all this time because they wanted it to be a certain value, but they didn't want to have to pay everyone to make it that value. So then they had withdrawal approvals. So then they weren't letting people withdraw their Mines tokens to be on chain to then sell them. So,
Mhm.
like it creates a huge problem. And, some people might, be a little more conspiratorial saying it's like completely nefarious. I don't know about that. All I know is what happened. And that's, all I'll comment on. But, it's definitely very alienating to the users. And, getting around that, obviously not having withdrawal approvals and stuff. I mean, it might make sense in certain cases, but they're definitely making it more challenging rather than making it easier. And again, like you were saying, we have to make this as easy as possible and with like the least amount of resistance, the least amount of friction to actually get people using these things. So,
And
like, what are some of
I mean,
no?
that's not the issue. Like, is
Yeah,
why have what is the reason for implement this arbitrary withdrawal limit? I think the reason is quite clear. They don't want to take the price. But
yeah,
is that a legitimate reason to implement this policy? I think that could be argued. And this is one of the issues with the issues of centralized services is that they could change on a whim. They could wipe out your Mines token balance overnight if they choose
yeah,
to. If I know they say they're free speech platform, but let's say, oh, this person violated some law. We're not going to show you the evidence because it's illegal to show you the evidence, and then we're going to take away his entire amount. How do you how there's no recourse for you because they have control over your data. They have control over your content. You can't be like, hey, this was just an innocent picture. It wasn't anything illegal I put up. You don't have access to that anymore if they decide to block you out of the system. So again, is transparency and decentralization, these things play out in very real and very meaningful ways that I think is starting to affect more people, but right now it's still a pretty small slice of individuals, content
Yeah.
creators specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've actually had many like cases where people have reached out to me with like instances on mines where they were banned or
Mm-hmm.
they're posting something and everything they're posting is being marked explicit and they don't actually have anything explicit. So I mean, yeah, nothing's perfect, and I mean at least they have community based appeals, so you can appeal something. I mean, not if you're banned, obviously, because you don't have access to the platform, but for any other kind of moderation decision you can at least appeal it and then have like a
Yeah.
jury kind of thing. It's a very unique way for them to do moderation, and I appreciate that they're attempting something like different and unique. But yeah, there's definitely the problem where it's like, yeah, like if I mean, they do say if you don't have your mines tokens on chain, who knows what could happen to them. But it's like you have to also ask to do that. So it kind of creates a bit of a problem there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of like the Atmos token,
Yeah.
was that made mainly for discussions? Like what was the motivations behind that?
Discussion is actually a side project that became its own thing.
Okay.
So the Atmos project has existed for quite a while. It's always designed to provide a layer of privacy on top of different blockchains, right? So what drove us to create discussions was actually very early on. EOS had a governance system. They were making decisions on chain. They were kind of reviewing different cases with like a pseudo court system that thankfully we got rid of. Um, so we saw this important piece of governance happening, but we didn't see the infrastructure to support it. They were doing these communications on Telegram. They were doing these communications on like private forums, all which whose record could be erased very easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have like, oh well, we made this decision because this president was set by these individuals, so we should follow, like how a regular court system would behave. So we
Yeah.
created it. Turns out, these kind of very esoteric side projects are not very interesting to most people. But what we did see is projects that are building on EOS, like, hey, can we adopt this software to use it as our form for our on-chain communication because we want to stay decentralized and we want to make sure that everyone can participate. And we also want to understand that how this user is related to the project. Because if you're just a user with no stake, and this is a problem like we encounter a lot on Reddit, is that you have one community who has no stake or have no interest and on the topic of another community. So just to pick two random cryptocurrencies, let's say Dogecoin and Link, right? So you could have the Link Marines go and barrage the Doge subreddit, and they do that because they have an interest in trashing their community, let's say. And this is a big issue. So we started thinking about different ideas. Then that's kind of where discussions came from. I think I lost track of your question, but
No, it was just how Atmos was created and the
yeah.
motivations, and then how that's different from discussions.
Yeah, so Atmos is a privacy layer. All the tokens, we haven't enabled it yet. This is gonna come sometime early next year. When enable the privacy layer, all the EOS tokens, all the tokens that we do support at the moment, and TLOS tokens in the future, they will automatically gain a layer of anonymity when they reside on the Atmos blockchain. The Atmos second, we call it side chain, we call it child chain. There's a lot of different terminologies, but it's basically a blockchain that's derived from the main blockchain. So like a subset of the transactions, and we link them together.
Mm-hmm.
And the Atmos token is what powers that network of child chains, and it pays out the transaction fees generated on doing different services like tipping, like paying for time lock content, all these different transactions, they do have a transaction cost, and that cost is in the form of the token that's being transferred. And then all the Atmos token holders would kind of get a portion of that. So it's very similar to like a DEX, revenue sharing token. Very, very, very similar in terms of function.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of like, oh geez, I forgot my question. While I think of it, what are some of the next big updates you've got in the works for Discussions.app?
Yeah. So the two things we roll out again is the time lock content, which we're catering towards content creators, and we're working. A lot of the work is not actually technical development work; it's kind of community outreach. Kind of building those relationships. But the other big piece is our swapping functionality. So I'm sure EOS is not the easiest blockchain to use. Um, I my head explodes a little bit every time someone asks me, why is there no CPU on my account? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And I think the reason is really because bad design, right? You're placing the burden of resource management on the user. So one of the brilliance of discussions that we say, hey, you know what? Maybe the user shouldn't be the guy toying around with CPUs and GPUs and RAM or whatever. We take care of that. You as a user do what you want. So we implemented swaps on discussions. So when you get a token or when you deposit a token onto discussions, you can very easily swap it for another EOS token, and you don't have to go to the decentralized exchange. You don't have to worry about CPU. Everything is done very free, fast. Just obviously there's the transaction cost that's associated with it. So that's the big step we're going forward. We're kind of balancing, sort of deciding whether to go deeper into that DeFi space, because again, this is a space that we are well positioned to go into, or do we want to leverage right now right into the NFT space, which is another space that we've been watching very closely for a very long time, and kind of charge into that. Right now, our roadmap is that we nail down the DeFi stuff as much as we can within our competency, and then we gotta move on to integrating NFTs, and that integration will come in the form of the Wax blockchain. So again, right now we're live on EOS. We're going to be live on Tilo sometime in the next month, and then after that, we're gonna be going on the Wax blockchain and supporting the booming NFT ecosystem that's over there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, NFTs are really part of a huge craze right now for sure. So my question that I remembered was regarding like building on the blockchain. It's definitely way different from traditional platforms, and I think what a lot of people like a misconception that a lot of people have, and it's like, well, why don't they have something basic like notifications or whatever it happens to be. But they don't realize that like you guys have to build this stuff from scratch, whereas like legacy platforms already have all these tools of every possible combination of the tool and design, all the different things, all the APIs. They have everything already, and they just need to kind of like plug in and play with them, whereas you guys have to do a lot of this stuff from scratch. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because I think a lot of people they really don't understand how much more time it's going to take to do something simple. And they have way too high expectations for like how fast something is going to come out or whatever happens to be.
I mean, I think you put it very succinctly. It's just we're reinventing the wheel, and we're reinventing the wheel that has built civilization. At least in terms of software, right? Software has always been built around decentralized. That's the starting point. Why would you, before we have, program came before networking. Why would you program that would be shared between two massive computers? It doesn't make sense. These computers were siloed things. You fed the tape into it. It did the calculation. They spit the number out. There's no point of connecting them. So, but blockchain is this new programming paradigm where you have to start with the network. You have to start how do I get this information across all these different nodes that might be operating in different time zones, have different connections, that are a lot of variables that would interfere with the functioning of the network, not the individual system, but the network. So, you mentioned notifications. Like, okay, if you have a centralized service, if I'm connected to you and I'm the centralized service, and I kind of have these strings that I'm all connected to you guys, it's very easy for me to pull one string and give you a little tug, right? But if we have a web, like, who do I tug to give that person a notification? I have to jump a few hoops. Like, hey, tug that guy for me, and then you tug that guy for me, and then you tug that guy for me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of giving you like a general image of the mess of the web that we're dealing with. But
Yeah.
over time we're going to evolve different tools. Discussions again is leading the forefront in building out the technology for doing that. All code is open source. Any project who is interested in replicating discussions to use for their specific project. So let's say you have ScottCoin, right? ScottCoin wants to run a discussions like community. We copy our repo, you kind of switch out the Atmos token with your ScottCoin, and then you're good to go. You have all the functionalities. And the best part about that is if you keep a certain level of compatibility, our two community can actually communicate. So you're
Mm.
not starting from scratch, right? People could sign in discussions and interact with your website. Uh, so again, and that's another area that we're looking to build out going into the next year, where we want to start helping other people, helping other projects build up their own interface. And we would love to work with some other decentralized social media platforms because tackling this issue of centralized platform is a huge issue. And one of the funny thing is that you hear a lot about these decentralized platforms talk about how they're gonna become the next Facebook, the next Instagram. Like, that's not really the point, So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, that's probably just kind of like their marketing shtick, but yeah, it's definitely more about solving a lot of these problems rather than just like being like, the next cool thing, the next TikTok.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think it's a lot more about, actually having the solving these issues. And I mean, again, like we said originally at the beginning of this, a lot of people are just unaware that there's these problems or that they're being affected by these problems because if someone's unaware of a problem they might say, well, I mean, it's probably because it doesn't affect me. It's like, well, it does affect you. I mean, you could get money for your post, or you could be censored, or Twitter could get hacked again and it might affect you this time, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, I think it really comes back down to people being like educating themselves, becoming more aware of all the stuff that's going on, and just being more involved in their own privacy and in the things that they're doing online, and being more mindful of that kind of thing. So that's pretty much everything that I have here. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Oh, I actually wanted to. I was just catching up on your videos, and very. I find that you do these videos that are very interesting, where you actually publish how much you earn on these different social media platforms. And again, like we at Discussions, we're looking at how to best help content creators. We're not a big company. We can't sponsor different content creators like YouTube or other well-funded projects can. But I'm just curious, like, as a content creator, have you found working on decentralized social media um, as lucrative as you would have hoped for? Or I guess like a better question is probably like, how do you see any way how these platforms could be better at supporting content creators? Because I know you recently got a lot of money from Read Cash, but is that sustainable? Is that model sustainable? Right, one guy donated a lot of cash, and
Well, they just changed their model today.
oh yeah.
That's pretty ironic. Yeah, they have a point system,
Yeah.
and and essentially it's like a fund, and it was purely donation based. But I mean, like Mark Tamizel put in like $200,000 to it.
Mhm.
Um, but they just decided today or yesterday that they're deleting their point system because it was technically, I mean, everything they're doing is experimental. I mean, it's like one guy. But he's essentially making it so that they're going to have just like a bot that will tip people rather than giving out points. And I mean, I don't know how different it's going to be, but one of the things that they said is going to be more important is that they want to mainly be rewarding content that is exclusive to read.cash. That is
Mm.
something I'm definitely against because I don't like the idea of being like, you can't earn unless you just use this one platform only. Because it's like I still want to share my content with everyone, and I don't want to take away from anything else in hopes or for money. That's a very bad route to go down of going against my own audience just for more money. That's definitely not the way that you want to go. But I think in terms of like what I look for and what I want, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happy with what I've been getting, but that's also because I'm able to share it on every platform, and there isn't like exclusivity or issues with that. Um, I mean, I think for people coming from legacy platforms, they're happy to get anything. So because like a lot of people don't even realize that their content could get them any value, and I think this is a really really big issue or like key point that I've focused on is that people don't know that their content even has value until they get onto these like decentralized platforms and platforms that will actually like allow you to monetize like from day one. And they're like, oh, like this blog that I do, or these videos that I make, or these random things that I do that I've never been paid for before, I'm getting paid for like right away. So it's like the things that I do have value. And I think that is in itself just a huge paradigm shift for people to kind of grasp that everything that you put out inherently has value. Legacy platforms just weren't really allowing you to extract any of that value. And they were taking it because Facebook was just selling your information to advertisers and making billions, and you weren't getting anything from that. But what I look for generally, and what a lot of platforms have done, is they're giving you kind of a piece of that. And it's not always like ad based, whatever it happens to be. I mean, there's a lot of different content models too, and how they do rewards. So there's a lot of different things. Me personally, I don't have a favorite because I understand the caveats and I see the benefits and the drawbacks of all of them. So I'm just interested in testing them all out and using them. I definitely need to be more active on Discussions.app. So I'll definitely try to be posting on there more and getting a little more active on that platform for sure.
Yeah, try out the timeline content. I'm actually personally very proud of that feature because I think it strikes a good balance of keeping, letting content creators gain reward for the content, but also keeping the form open and transparent. Because we don't like the whole idea of discussion is that you could get the information you want in one place, and locking people out of content is just like a really odd thing to do. But if you have an expiration time on it, I think it's a good compromise.
Yeah, no, and I think that is a really, really innovative way to do it because a lot of people struggle, like especially content creators like myself. I struggle with the idea of if I put a paywall, like, is this going to be better? Is this going to be worse? Like, am I going to get more money that will allow me to make more content? Or am I just going to have like less people watching because, they can't afford to? So I think that's a huge issue for a lot of content creators. And that's why I think it's important to be able to like what you guys have done, like having time locked. I think that's a really good solution to that. And just all these different ways for people to earn without impeding on the user experience, I think is really, really important. And I think that blockchain platforms and decentralized platforms are doing a really good job of showing that and showcasing that and making use cases for that. And well, I guess before we end this off, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you think legacy platforms are going to change their ways? Do you think they're going to say like, look, all these platforms are doing all this stuff with blockchain, and people are really liking it? Do you think that they would ever change their ways? And I'll let you know what I think about this after you answer, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so similar to how you pay a lot of attention to the way that decentralized social media platforms are moving, we pay a lot of attention to centralized platforms that are moving. And you have Twitter Jack Dorsey. He's a big fan of Bitcoin. He's cooking something up. We don't know what yet, but he's cooking something up. Similarly, Reddit just integrated kind of pseudo Ethereum wallet. So these companies are moving at least technologically to that direction. Now, whether or not they would be able to fully switch over, I don't see that happening. Um, having worked in large corporations, when the people get get to positions of power, they are unlikely to give that up.
Yeah.
And yeah, and especially when you talk about businesses that has the entire platform, entire revenue model built around these centralized hierarchies, unless kind of burn everything down and piss off all your investors, um, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah. I think one of the big problems is that they're all just beholden to their shareholders, and like it would never work if YouTube was just like, hey, are you guys fine to have a huge like price like hit and like lose a bunch of money, but like hopefully it'll be better in the long term. And they're just like, well, probably not. I mean, like, I don't think that a lot of these, like, I mean, well, we saw Facebook was going to come out with Libra, and obviously it was by no means, within the ethos of blockchain. So I don't think personally that they're going to actually adopt the values and the things that we're looking for. Like you did make a good point. Whether or not they move there technologically, I don't know if they'll actually move there in terms of like the ethos and the values that people are actually looking for in those things: privacy, transparency, all that. Um, and yeah, I mean, do you think we'll end up with like a Blockbuster Netflix type scenario?
Uh, I I'm scared to say, and I want to say that I believe in the free market. I believe in user will go to the service that best provides them the best service.
Yeah.
But, and this is kind of getting a bit into politics here, but you're starting to see a lot of government creep into this arena and
Mm-hmm.
in favor of centralized platforms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have the TikTok ban now in America, at least. We had the WeChat ban, and these moves are favoring Facebook quite a bit. It's not a coincidence that Instagram rolled out their feature that mimics TikTok the day
Yeah.
after TikTok was banned. So I want to be optimistic and say technology will overcome it, but I do fear that there will be a future where these companies are so big and they have so much political power, not market power, that
Mm.
they're able to capture the regulatory system so that innovation doesn't, break through these monopolies. And it's already kind of true. Like, when's the last time you heard about a breakthrough social media app in the West? Right? It used to be like Facebook, and then you have all these weird random sites that pop up, get virality, and then they die. Like
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat, it used to be more frequent. But now what you're seeing is that big companies, they either buy them out, or, which is the new wave of things I'm scared of, is that they use the legal system to sniff them out. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm quite concerned about like the development in terms of in that direction. Yeah. So technology, I think we beat them hands down. Like, there's no competition. But when you're playing politics, it's not meritocracy, right? It's a different game. So
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. And yeah, it seems like these big tech companies are getting more and more involved in politics. And it's definitely concerning to see. And then, on the flip side, as you said, like with government getting more involved too, like there's like the recent, they're trying to end-to-end encryption, where they could just get Facebook to send them, whatever it happens to be. With decentralized platforms, you couldn't, like, they don't even have the access to send those things. So again, like, for people who are wondering, yeah, well, like, I don't have anything to hide, what's the problem? It's like, but do you want someone to be able to look at all of your stuff and get into all of your stuff? And it's like, for the same reason that you wouldn't give your password to anyone is the same reason why you would want to keep end-to-end encryption. And then again, with Twitter being hacked, another reason why it's just a lot of these things that people thought were so safe are actually not the case. And I hope people see through that now. Like, it should be becoming more and more obvious why these things are important, and why, Discussions.app and all these different decentralized and blockchain, like decentralized social platforms and platforms that use the blockchain or cryptocurrency in some way, or just even privacy focused or free speech focused platforms. Like, for example, a lot of people would say something like, oh, well, if you don't like it, go and make your own. Well, every platform that I've seen that has been made is usually just like attacked relentlessly. They try to shut it down. And it's just really ironic that they'd say, oh, well, like, fine, go and make your own. And then people do. And then they're like, oh, wait, no, don't make your own. Stop. And then we were going to make sure you have to come back here. It's like, I thought you didn't want us here. So there's really no winning with a lot of these platforms. And like you said, as it becomes more political, they're able to do so much more. And it's really not free market anymore. So yeah, I think it's really important for people to patronize all of these decentralized platforms. I'm on every single one. So I can say that I've definitely done my fair share, but I always have to, because I'm on so many, I definitely need to make sure I'm patronizing the good ones, and making sure I put my time to the right things. So like I said, I definitely got to get back on Discussions and go through all that, because I probably haven't been there in some time. So I'll definitely be going through that tonight and taking a look.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is everything for me. Where can everyone go to learn more about Discussions.app, and where can they follow you and Discussions on social?
Yeah, so Discussions.app is just Discussions.app. You can find me posting. I'm the user with the little whale icon. So I'm pretty easy to spot. And obviously, I'm on Twitter at Jack Wales. I post a lot of interesting opinions on there. So. And if you want to hear a different side of EOS that is other than the rosy picture people paint, I think Scott knows I'm the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and doing this again. Everyone, if you do want to go way back in time, you can also watch our original interview. I think also Paul was on that too, right? Yeah, Paul was on that too. So you can hear from both of the co-founders and get both of their takes on that. That's a lot more focused on Discussions.app. This was kind of more general, but again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your insights and opinions. And yeah, everyone, make sure to go and check out Discussions.app and follow Discussions and Jack as well. Again, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for watching this video to the very end. Since you did, it'd be awesome if you could give this video a like and comment #1ham in the comments below. Also, it'd be awesome if you could subscribe to this channel and follow me anywhere under @ScottCBusiness, because I'm basically on every platform. You can find all the platforms that I am mainly using though at www.scottcbusiness.com. You can also find all my social links as well as my crypto addresses if you'd like to donate to me on Cointree at cointr.ee/ScottCBusiness. And you can also donate directly by donating to scottcbusiness.crypto or scottcbusiness.eth with supporting wallets. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scott C Business, signing off. Cheers.